it's not just about the methodology or the tools or the frameworks, but it's at the end of the day, it's about the people. And I wanted to learn more about, how do people really work and how can we make sure that at the end of the day, whether you're an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, that you really understand how to lead yourself, how to lead the people in your organization, in your team, and also, of course, how to lead your organization. Because I think at the end of the day, it's not a question about the biggest idea, about the best framework, but it's truly a question about having the right minds together. And of course, from a leadership and entrepreneurial perspective, or as a founder, you want to have the right minds together to get your idea and your vision off the ground.
Wow, then I'm Sean Gold, today's guest on Tool Thinker.
Would allow me to let go of my 9-to-5 job.
Let's dig a little bit deeper. Who do we really want to target here? And that's where you live.
Sometimes.
If you love long night, then be a startup founder. Just do it. Take the leap.
I always said it, the boss, even for the money that we were earning.
You have to pivot or else you'll run out of money.
Hi, Michaela.
Great to see you today.
How are you doing today?
Good. Everything's good so far. I hope same for you.
Very good. Very good on my side as well. Yeah, so today we're going to dig into your journey and how you came to learn about and play roles in startups. I think you might be wearing many hats based on what you've told me so far, but we're going to dig into all of that to make sure that we are telling the true story about
Sure.
your journey. Let's start with your background.
So my background is not in technology, although I've always worked for the last 20 plus years with people in technology. So I have a business degree as my first degree, and I worked for a large consulting firm named Accenture, which might be known to a few of you. I did basically very, big transformation, digital strategy and transformation programs for them all over the world, around 10 years, until I came to the point where I figured, it's not just about the methodology or the tools or the frameworks, but it's at the end of the day, it's about the people. And I wanted to learn more about, how do people really work and how can we make sure that at the end of the day, whether you're an intrapreneur or an entrepreneur, that you really understand how to lead yourself, how to lead the people in your organization, in your team, and also, of course, how to lead your organization. Because I think at the end of the day, it's not a question about the biggest idea, about the best framework, but it's truly a question about having the right minds together. And of course, from a leadership and entrepreneurial perspective, or as a founder, you want to have the right minds together to get your idea and your vision off the ground. So basically, I went back to school. I did a psychology degree in addition to my master's in business. And that was for me actually a starting point to start my own company, which is Brain and Spa. And I really wanted to make sure that we have a place where there is, leadership design and organizational design happening. So I sometimes refer to myself as a leadership designer because it's one thing, you got to work with the individuals, with the human beings, whether it's the leader or the team or the whole organization. But at the same time, you got to design it very individually because there is no one size fits all. I think this is something that brought me into my first organization, which I founded myself. There were two more startup co-founderships, so to say, in the meantime, all around the aspect of how can innovation work, how can you bring products to market, how do you do your MVP, and how do you do it in a way that it's not just about the technology. Of course, you need to have an awesome idea, a great idea, something unique, something where there is paying clients, like all these criteria. But then the question really starts, how do you do that? For example, for the last 5 years, I've been working with technical universities and guiding and leading some of their startup or deep tech founders to say, okay, it's one thing that you have your marketing and your financials and your product ready, but then there is the thing about you being a leader and there's the thing about how you build the organization. And I think this is basically the core things that I've been doing apart from some lecturing at university. But really, that's the core that I've been. On the one hand, I always joke around on this one. I do speak corporate-ish because I've worked with large corporates for 20 years, but I also speak startup-ish, if that was a language, right? Because I've done my own startups. Have my own founder stories.
I think startup is a language, and it's a very different language from corporate, I think.
Yes.
But we're going to dig into all of that. So
Sure.
basically, why did you choose business as your first degree?
Well, see, this was interesting. I was like half from DNA. My dad was a business person. My mom was medical. So I did a bit of med school and I found out that maybe this is not the right thing for me. I was a bit too pragmatic when it came to solving the medical problems there.
Mhm.
So I went into business because I figured it's that these strategies and how things work together. And I mean, for me, an organization is like a well orchestrated thing. And obviously, you need people with different backgrounds. But at the end of the day, it's less the technology that got me excited. I was never made for lab work, although I do work a lot with people with the chemicals and physics background, etc. But I think I'm just very close to working with the people and helping them design the thing
Mhm.
that obviously brings their idea to the market.
And you came to know that because your dad, you said, was in business. So
Yeah,
um, like, how did you come to know? So did you try both first, or
yes.
oh, you tried both? Oh, I see.
Yes, I
I see.
tried both. So I was for, well, my first anatomy and physiology courses in medicine, I did even in the US. And that was close to getting me into well, some sort of a scholarship degree. But then I figured, you know what? I mean, obviously, by the time I'm a doctor, I'm a very impatient person. I guess that's part of my entrepreneurial story. So I wanted to see things evolve, to try out new things. Now, obviously, in medicine, unless you go into I don't know, pharma or research, or if you stay at university hospitals, etc. There is not much of trialing out, right? So I think in the business world, I was always keen on doing things in a different way and trying out new things. And this is where at least from my end, I found more touch points on the business end.
That was closer to you. You bring up research, which is very, very, it's something I've been thinking about a lot. So when we get to ninth grade or somewhere there, depending
Mm,
where you're going to school, you either going to the sciences or you're going to business.
mm,
On the sciences was where it was mainly geared around research.
hmm.
Now, after learning about business, startup, to be specific, I realize that startup is research as well.
Yes.
But when you're young and you're in school, they try to paint a picture as if these are very stark different areas.
Mm,
I've been really thinking about that and wondering if that's the right thing, right approach. From your
yeah.
experience in startup, what would you say that you think that's the right approach?
So I don't think that schooling system, and probably doesn't matter which school systems we are talking about here. I think we are just there's a lot of things that these kids get, of course, which is good, but there's all a lot of things where the school system does not prepare our kids for the life that's ahead of them, whatever career they're choosing. I mean, I'm a mom to a teenager myself, and she's 15 now, so I have a pretty good idea about, okay, so where should I do? What should I go? Which course should I choose? Where should I go for university? Do I need for that job more of a science or more maths or more English or more whatever? And that's not the question, because what you need, regardless of whether you go into the STEM, like, the scientific direction, or into business, I think what's so important, and I could tell this over and over again when I work with, brilliantly educated students, PhD postdocs from very good universities. I've worked with students from off Cambridge and off Technical University Vienna. What happens there is they've been very well trained on their core subject, on their whatever degree they have, right? Whether it's this biotechnology or physics or super special chemicals, something, right? But what they've not been trained on, and I think this is a core skill, where we're back to entrepreneurship, is to say, okay, how do I get a big picture? How do I do the research to have my big picture? How do I break this down into what we would call in the startup world the business model canvas, right? So what's the USP? Who are your customers? What would they value? Who would be suppliers or production or, creation partners? And at the end of the day, what would that cost me and would that bring me money? And if you look at very innovative organizations, they are really fast and really good at, I would almost call it like an X-ray. They're really good at X-raying ideas, and the people they employ, maybe they don't even have that perfect whatever XYZ degree, but they have this logic of thinking things through. And I think this is something where I think we where in general school systems are not at all doing a great job, because at the end of the day it's not a question whether you go for science or for business or for law school or med school or whatever degree you're going after. I think what's important that you learn how to lead yourself. Like self leadership is not a curriculum at all, unfortunately, but this is where all starts. If nobody teaches you how to come up with a great vision, how to prove whether there's a market for this, whether this is a big or a small idea, how to make your plan, how to set your goals, how to get clarity, and how to structure yourself and your team eventually, then how should you make anything successful? And I think this is having these discussions a lot these days with my own daughter, but also with kids and friends her age, that obviously there is a few schools who do it right, to ask the kids to set objectives and to meet, to bounce whether they've reached the objectives. What do you want to go for? And I think this is something what we need way more, because eventually if you are 15, 16 these days, and there is AI and all kind of technologies around, nobody knows what's in 5, 6 years by the time you finished probably high school and finished your bachelor's, right? So it's not the question of the content you learn, but it's this approach and the how. It's not the what, it's a how question. And I think the frameworks for the hows, or for the how questions, so to say, this is what we need to learn and become real masters in. And this is also obviously what truly good entrepreneurs know very well how they do it.
Some people say it's strategic because you're meant to manage, you're not meant to create.
Yeah.
That's why it's not in the curriculum, right?
Yes, exactly.
But you're right, it's not there, and it's something that a lot of people might want to know, and that's why it's that you're focusing on something like that. So you did your first degree, but it wasn't
Mhm.
until you major. Was it a major in philosophy? Right.
No, my first degree was in business with a major in international business, and then I went back into psychology and
Psychology.
did a major in leadership and leadership and health, in terms of healthy leadership and motivation, high performance.
hmm I'm curious as to why is it that you didn't decide to start a business immediately after you
Mhm.
finished your business degree, as
Mm.
opposed to finishing your psychology degree.
Well, there's about probably, I would say, 10, 12 years in between. So when I finished my business master's degree, I really wanted to learn. I wanted to, like, apply what I've learned, just to make sure it's not just off the books, because obviously there's a lot of things you learn at university, and I was always keen to seeing it play out, to really see how things are how things are applied to certain situations. And I really wanted to, get my hand dirty in the big business, to really understand what is it that I need to look out for. Because eventually, even if you, and I see this a lot happening these days with startup founders, they have great ideas, and then obviously their great idea meets big business, whatever industry, some corporate, because obviously that's where they want to collaborate with them, they want to supply them, they want to work together, maybe even want to be bought by them. So whatever the story there is, but if you have no idea how a corporate works and how decision making is done there, if you have no idea how they're literally how they tick, so to say, you have a very hard time. So that was for me something a mentor back then said: listen, spend a few years with an established organization. And back then, now looking back at these first 10 years of my career, um, I would say I did not know back then what I learned that was more like almost subconscious learning. So even these days, sometimes people would ask me, why would you know that? You've never been in that department. I'm like, I don't know. I've just seen it over and over and over again, how things work and what you need to look out for in order to build a successful company. And I think then after these 10 years, I realized it's at the end of the day, it's so much people work, and you don't get that fixed with the better systems and the better structures and the new SAP or the new whatever product or tool. It does not help you if you don't get the people thing right. So this is why, after I think it was around about 10, 12 years in my first part of my career, I went back to university to say, I think there's something that I've seen giving you issues and headaches in the real world, but I don't have the approaches and the right tools to help people solve that. And I wanted to make that solid and not just, some read a few books and claim to be the super guru on ABC. So that's why I went back to back to school, completely different department. And I said, I want to understand how the human brain works, because eventually, if you understand that part, and if you understand how you motivate and how you can build trust and how healthy high performance really works, this is where we are going these days, right? And I think this was then in that combination, right after that second degree, I got immediately into, having my own first company, because then I knew, okay, I'm ready now, and I just so know what needs to happen out there.
That's when you started your company, Brain and Spa.
Yes, exactly. That was back in 2012, 2014, I think it was.
Okay. So tell me more about Brain and Spa.
Sure. So Brain and Spa, it was funny because when you start your own company, and I know tons of founders out there can probably relate to this very well. It's like, how do I call this thing, right? I know what I'm going to be doing, but what's the name of my company? And it should be something that's cool, that's unique, that's obviously telling a story. So there's all these requirements, so to say, that you put yourself into the big pot, and you're trying to make something cool and something that people can remember and that sticks. And for me, it was always that combination of saying it's something around high performance. I truly believe that entrepreneurship is it's not an 80% thing. It's always 120%, because you are really good entrepreneurs by heart. They don't stop, right? Their thing is constantly spinning. So obviously there is something about high performance. Now here's the big but. I've seen too many who did high performance at the speed of I don't know how many 100 miles an hour, and they didn't make it very far, because there is eventually one point in time where either relationships, health, some other things make you, they literally pull in the throttle really hard and make you brake while still going a couple 100 miles an hour, right? So I figured there is one thing about high performance, but then it's going to be in a healthy way. And with healthy, I don't mean, have your apples and go to the gym. Well, this is also part of healthy, but there got to be a different approach than just going crazy in the hamster wheel. So this is where Brain and Spa, if your brain is like your high performance unit, your CPU in your body, and the spa area is the place where you go to in a hotel to relax and to rejuvenate and to recharge, which is both super important. This is what I wanted to bring to the market, and that's where the name came from. And that's basically still what Brain and Spa is doing. It's about designing, leadership design organization, helping leaders for themselves to design their own self-leadership skills, but at the same time also helping leadership teams, founder teams, executive teams find their way of working in a healthy, high-performing way, and eventually, obviously, helping entire organizations do the same. Yes. And to really have I think it's the balance is one thing, but to really have what I call structures, habits, and tools, or habits, tools, and mindset. It's all these three. If you don't have the structures, you're lost. If you don't have the right mindset, you're exactly lost. If you don't have certain habits or processes and high performing things in place, you're also lost. So it's obviously, how do you put these three in place so it works for you, works for your team, and eventually works for your organization?
I totally agree. Totally agree with that. I mean, I'm in operations right now.
Mhm.
I'm telling you, without those things that you mentioned, nothing is gonna go right.
Nothing.
Your well-being is not gonna go right. Your operation
Exactly.
will be in shambles. Like just nothing will go right, and
Exactly.
all your efficiency, which is what you're after mostly. Uh,
Mhm.
so how is Brain and Spa doing now? You're still running Brain and Spa right now?
Yes. It's still running. It's always been up there. So there was a couple of years ago, I co-founded one company, and I was a co-CEO in the M&A of another company, where it was still, I mean, it was always around how can we make startups and corporates, or how can we make them learn from each other? That was, I think, something when I founded Brain and Spa. I was primarily working with larger organizations, but then more and more startups, like this startup thing, especially in Europe. That was not, there were startups 20 years ago. It was just not that present and not that, let's call it famous. But back in, I don't know, 2015, 2017, 16, 17, where there was a huge, well, I don't want to call it a startup bubble, but I think the topic as such just became really big. And it was the age of, somebody was able to code a few lines, build an app, and made millions of dollars, right? So I think this is where more and more startups approached me, and there was a big emptiness between, okay, corporates wanted to be cool as well, they just had no idea how to do it, and startups were cool, but they were a bit like headless chickens sometimes. They didn't know really how to put the structures in place, as you were saying, that the operations and everything works well. So we founded a company back then to say, okay, how can we bring these two worlds together in a more playful approach? So how could the big ones learn from the small ones how to be agile and nimble, and at the same time, how could the small ones, like the startups, learn from the corporates? So what does it take to build a real business, and how do you operate, and how do you do things? And that, I think this was something that I did in between, but Brain and Spa was always there, and it is still there. And it's funny because when I started out, I was, well, pretty well in my early 30s or late 20s. I had a baby girl back then. Everybody was saying, how stupid, you cannot leave your corporate job, you're on super fast track. I was an executive at the age of 28, so I was really fast tracking at Accenture. And then I said, okay, listen, I mean, I guess that's the entrepreneur in me that really said, hey, you got to do your own thing. And I think this is something you don't learn that at school either, right? I mean, after grade 7, there is grade 8, and after grade 8, there is grade 9, and after bachelor, there is master. And so it's kind of like everything is given. But as an entrepreneur, if you have that gene, you're just willing to take some risks, right?
It doesn't leave you alone. It just keeps
Exactly.
nagging and nagging. It's like something that you have to address instead of scratch at it, that you have to just
Yes.
address.
Yes. And I just know that I remember, I don't know how many people, I mean, there is so many, obviously there is, parents' generation who say, don't be stupid, you're a woman, you have, a family, you have little kids, you're taken care of, don't you do that? Aren't you just insane? And then there is people saying, no, you wouldn't want to found a company, not in that space, you don't have a product yet, la, la, la. So it's all these, I called them the caregivers, but literally on the very big parentheses, right? And first they tell you all these awful stories. And I'm like, okay, it can't be any worse. I mean, if this all happened to people already, hello, let me see. That sounds very funny. No, long story short, and it's so interesting. I just recently met a former colleague and back then friend of mine. We literally lost sight of each other, and she said, you're the only one I know who's been in business for almost 14 years now. How do you do that?
Mhm.
I'm like, well, it's if you're really about it, it's not just a fancy thing you do for a year or two. You really want to see that this thing can take off, and that you're committed, and obviously that you always reach out to good mentors and coaches. And it's just every day 1% more. You just need to challenge yourself, because there is nobody who is challenging you. There is no HR department that says, oh, by the way, Mark or Michaela, it's time to do your goals and objectives for this year. You got to do it yourself. And I think if you have the right systems in place, and I never had all the right systems, but eventually you learn. And the better mentors and coaches you have, the better you become eventually.
That's great advice.
Mm,
But how did you deal with all of that? Because, like, I think that's a make or break point for a lot of entrepreneurs.
yeah. So there is two answers to that question. The first one is, um, I I back then had a very good mentor who helped me through the process. Or it's probably was more a coach than a mentor. And I think this is something I highly advise, whether you're a startup founder or you're in a corporate role and thinking about your own thing, that you have somebody neutral. This is not your better half, not your spouse, not your husband, not your wife, not brother, sister, mom, dad, uncle, auntie. So this is not a relationship thing that belongs to the family. It must be somebody who's done it, who's been there, who's seen a bit more, who's a few years ahead of you, who and with whom you have a trusted relationship, or you build a trusted relationship, so this person is allowed to challenge you. And I think this was something I had that very early in my career, and I'm still very thankful. I always call him like this is like a dad's kind of friend. So that guy is like 20 years older than I am. He gave me some tough cookies to work out, and he was just brutally honest with, hey, listen, this is what you're doing here. This is what it's needed. If you don't do that, then da da da. What if you do this? Have you tried that? So you need somebody, even as an entrepreneur, there is always self-doubt, and obviously you don't know so many things for sure. So I think for me, the one part answering your question is have a very good coach and mentor, whatever you want to call that, but somebody with whom you literally meet frequently, who gives you challenges, but with whom you can also bounce some ideas, and like a sparring partner, right? And that is not family or friends. And the second thing, and this is I would say that's a bit of a female answer here, but I do hope that there is some female entrepreneurs out there as well. I told you right before I started my own company and I quit my corporate job. I had a baby, and back then, when you have your first child, there's all this war stories about pregnancy and giving birth and what can happen to the baby and what happens afterwards. And my midwife, it was funny enough, a close friend of my mom from the early days, she always said, the only thing you need to do is shut up and, like, just literally close your ears. Do not listen to any one of these stories because they are all not true for yourself, your own situation. And I figured, I think this is probably very close to founding a company as well. Just don't listen. Well, listen to the war stories, just in terms of, oh, this is another story, so to say. But don't shy away to say, oh my God, if all that happens to me, I never, ever, this just does not work out. And I think this is important that, and again, then this closes the loop to this sparring partner. All these war stories, entrepreneurial war stories that I heard back then about what can go wrong and what other people did and how fast insolvency and how you need to watch out for this and take care of that. And it's going to be all so ugly and burden, blah, blah, blah. I picked it up as information pieces and I bounced it with my sparring partner, and he helped me sort it out. And well, some of them I could sort out myself. And I think that's probably the biggest, looking back, the best advice, not the biggest, but the biggest differentiator that I could make work for me, to say, don't shy away, take it as valid input, but don't claim that this is going to be happening to you. There is never, ever a second founder story. So it's all very unique, but what you should never do, which is considered very stupid if you do it, if you just believe all this happens and you just think there is a rule book that somebody gives to you, and according to that rule book, you build a company, right?
How did you find your coach?
That was actually a recommendation from a friend. She's worked with him before, and I think this is how it works these days. I mean, obviously there is a gazillion of coaches out there, and I always say, well, for sure there is a few of them are really good, but always test, have they done it themselves? What kind of background do they have? Is there a personal fit? And I had, clients that been looking for years for a good coach, and then somehow we were a good fit. And I also have clients, or I also get recommended to people where I say, listen, we're not a good fit. We just don't, I think the chemistry is not working. You'd better be off with somebody else. But I think it's very important that this is, a sparring partner you have for more than just one or two sessions, but literally who could be more of an on and off relationship. Sometimes there's more intense periods, and even if you are a senior leader, and I mean you're in a corporate role as well, as far as I remember your story, sometimes it's just hard because the higher up in the ranks, the thinner the air, the less people you can openly talk to. But the more important it would be to have somebody to bounce some ideas and see how things are doing, and what if this, what if that. I mean, it's just a numbers game at the end of the day. But I think it's so important. Great leaders in corporate as well as in the startup world, they always have a very small circle of trustees with whom they can discuss and with whom they can share openly. And I think, this is something I would definitely agree to when I look back at my own founder story, so to say.
For sure. So Brain and Spa right now, what's your service structure like? How does your business work?
hmm so basic there is, I would say there's three streams within Brain and Spa. There is the very, I would call it a very classical transformation consulting like service. So where there is organizations, mostly I start working with the leader or the leadership team, and then they're at a point where they say, this is not yet at the stage where we would put out an RFP and ask for the big consulting firms to bid and to come in and do a 3, 6, 10 month program to run everything and redesign the processes, but we need to start a little bit earlier. So there is, within Brain and Spa, there is this one dimension of saying, hey, how does strategy work? How do you prepare your organization for being agile in the terms of being flexible? So that's probably closest to what I would call transformation consulting. It's more kind of a consulting work. Now, the second stream, which I'm dealing with, is right now a lot of being a sparring partner to individual CEOs, CTOs, founders, senior leaders, where they say, listen, I need that person with whom I can reflect, who is challenging me, whether I started a new role, I want to change roles, I started a new company, or we just, as a founder team, we just need that external. Well, a client of mine, he always says, you're the best external board member we could have. So it's like, you're part of the team, but you're not. And I think this is super critical because I never have a interest conflict when I say something. I don't have a role in the organization, yet I still understand how startup works. I still understand how organizations work. So I can challenge the leader or the leadership team. And this is the second kind of like, the second stream within Brain and Spa. And the third one is, which we've started really build out last year, is to say, okay, all the ideas, all the knowledge, all these findings, that's what I always call it when it comes to working with corporates as well as with startups. We basically created a product around it. We created a framework that is now really easily available on different dimensions where leaders, it's called the BME operating system. So it really helps you as a founder, but as well as a corporate leader or leadership team to say, what if there is the technology stack that you need these days, from AI to all the data, blah, 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 you also need an operating or performance stack. And what is that you need to put in place for yourself, but also for your team? And we've built basically that BME operating system as the third stream to say that's a product people could literally buy and implement for themselves if they just want to do it for themselves. But also we're having whole departments basically use the same thing. And obviously if everybody in a department levels him or herself up, then this is literally an uplift for a whole department.
Nice, nice. And which one of those are taking off the most?
Well, I think there's a handover. It started off as the transformation consulting and strategy development was the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned into a huge need for the sparring and the executive coaching, just because I think the last years were pretty tricky for leaders in corporate as well as in startup situations. And now I'm seeing more that people say, okay, we're just lost. We have tools and we have processes and we have people, but none of these things kind of like seem to work together. Plus, then there is a market out there that's so fast and there is constantly changing something. We cannot keep up with this. And the last thing we want to see is more people run into burnout or more people leaving our organization because they're fed up and tired with how we run things here. So right now, that operating system thing, I wouldn't say it's like fully taken over, but we see quite a good interest, a rise of interest on this one to say what is needed here. Because I think at the end of the day, if I look back, I'm in business now 20 years, and there has always been something around leadership development. There has always been something about, how organizations work. There has always been something about how do we train our people. And there has, of course, always been something around which tools do we use and how do we optimize processes. And operations, you've probably came across a few of these things, right? Now, the thing is, all of these individual islands are nice, but if nobody teaches you how to integrate and what to put on top, so like, which string to pull, that the whole orchestra works, I think this is something we are lacking a lot these days in organizations.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I remember you saying that there are a lot of coaches out there, right? What would you say makes Brain on Spot different from all the others?
Well, there is two things. I think the first one is that not too many coaches have done startup and corporate world and are not yet 60 years old.
Mhm.
So I think there is a difference when if you work with the coach, and I've seen both ends. I do have what I call myself more senior coaches that I've worked with for several reasons. But then there is a difference if you are in your, I don't know, early 30s, mid 30s, late 20s, early 40s, you're in a different life situation. And I think being an entrepreneur demands a lot, but it should never demand your life, right? So when I say work with the coach, it's a difference if somebody can relate to your general life situation. Obviously, we have different life stages. There is a stage where we are, I always call it young and stupid, something between high school and finishing student life, right? And then there is something becoming serious and maybe having family, however people want to have that, but something around settling in and or get exploring the world. And then there is probably something where you say, hey, I'm keen on having certain career progressions and I want to see my track record pile up, etc. And then there's of course something that I don't want to call it retirement, but that's kind of like more seasoned life where it's easygoing and you don't have to worry about too many things. And I think that's important if you want to work with a coach that is somebody who can relate to your situation and who is in an age range, and we're talking plus minus 10 years here, right? Where you would say, okay, that person's done the corporate thing early in her or his career, has done the founding thing as well, knows more than just a few stories and watched it from the side, how company founding, how that works. And if this is somebody, I would guess that's a good combination to go for. And then obviously it's always a personal chemistry thing. Always, just check out the person, see if you're on a personal level a fit, because you need to open up, both ends need to open up, and you don't need somebody who gives you just, the tap on the shoulder, how great you are, but you also need somebody who's challenging you.
Um, you think, from your experience working with startups as well as corporate organizations, do you find them very different to work with, or do you have to like think differently when you're going into a startup meeting versus when you're going into a corporate meeting?
This is a very good question, Mark, because while you were saying this, I tended to say, yes, it is indeed different. But then thinking about it, I have to admit that at the end of the day, if you work with people, whether they are leading a 10,000 man woman organization or a 10 man woman organization, it's not just a zero difference after the number one, right? But I think currently, given these market conditions, and there is quite some challenging things that are going on in the market across the globe, across industries, I think the topics that I'm discussing with corporates as well as with startups surprisingly are very close. So, yes, of course, they all work in different environments. And I think this is important that we always keep in mind which market am I in, like with a startup, something that could work in the one end of the world would be a complete failure in the other, and vice versa. And I think it's the same that you need to adjust whatever thing you're trying out, whatever framework you're putting in place. It works a bit different in a corporate than in a startup, but in essence, I would say the challenges are the same.
And it's just you, or you have a team with you?
I have a team, so it obviously there is a team more for for organizational, internal, and admin things, but also when it comes to delivery, I'm always a big fan of, being a team player, and everybody has different qualities. So whenever I work on client side, some projects I do literally all by myself for several reasons. But then there's also projects where I collaborate with quite a number of people, where we get together and see what is the best fit and how can we really make whatever request, how can we turn that into the best possible solution.
After watching it, I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired to call you and try to get help, and I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure people will learn from you. How can people reach you?
Well, I think the easiest one these days is they can reach me via LinkedIn. So just go to my LinkedIn profile. I am on my LinkedIn like daily, and I do answer. There is no assistant or anybody, so I'm very keen that my LinkedIn is my own account. So that's really me. And of course, there's also a website where they could sneak peek a little. It's brainspa.com. So feel free to see if there's something. There is a blog out there as well. I also have a newsletter where I share weekly some insights, which are always, it's a couple minutes read, not much, but I always try to basically digest what I've been experiencing over this week or the earlier week, and I try to make it very applicable and make founders as well as corporate leaders aware of what's going on, what are challenges that others are facing. And I think this is also something super important. It's just sometimes great to know, A, others have same challenges, and B, maybe have an idea how they try to solve it. And maybe that's something for the one or the other audience member out there as well.
And how far into the startup process do you coach? Because
Mm,
some people could just have an idea and they haven't started anything yet,
exactly.
as opposed to somebody that, already started getting customers to do
Mm,
transactions with customers, and,
yeah.
are you for all of them, or just are when they get to a certain stage?
So I would say I'm for those who are A, ambitious, and B, willing to be challenged.
Mhm.
Just to give, I don't know if this serves as an answer, but I have startups where they're very early in their ideation process, and they just need an external brain to say, okay, guys, this is what you need to think about. Have you done this? How is your structure here? What kind of are you clear on which market you're going into? Do you have your strategy? What's the roles? What's the objectives for this year? How do you do backcasting? How do you set certain things up so you're just getting in the right traction before the first customer order or whatever customer relationship starts happening? And then I have startups that are literally Series A, beyond Series A. There is big business knocking at their door. And this is still, I mean, it's a different phase, but sometimes these two ends of the startup spectrum can come within very short time frame. I'm not talking a year. That would be obviously a bit very, very super hockey stick, right? But it can happen literally within a few years, that you are me and my friends having that garage kind of idea, all the way to shoot, me and my friends sitting in the boardroom of corporate ABC trying to define how we are doing with that deal, and do we want that. And I think if the best startups I've seen and the most successful ones were those that did not just invest like money and time and effort in building their company. So they didn't just work in their company, like, they worked in their product, in their programming, in their tool, in their solution, but are the ones that are also working on their organization. And that includes they work on themselves as leaders, as leadership team, as well as how they built this whole thing, slash how they literally built that organization. And I think the ones that do really well, if they understand that this is a process that starts, I don't want to say on day one, but very soon, and that literally continues. It never stops eventually, right?
Nice, nice. Good to know. Well, Michaela, thank you so much for coming on Tool Thinker and sharing all of this value.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
I'm pretty sure people are going to be interested and will be reaching out.
Sure. Feel
Um,
free to do so.
all right. Thanks again, eh?
Thank you.
All right, cool. Just